Good morning. All right, the button was left here, so that's a good thing. You guys have heard a lot about big data. There have been some discussions about data and big data. I wanted to take a little bit of time and share some very specific thoughts and ideas kind of for a real firm in the real world today needing to come up with a solution to manage your data. A little bit of background. Rewind 15 years, it was necessary for a firm to process commissions. So a lot of firms went out, they bought a commission system, they started loading that data with brokerage and clearing firm data and paid commissions. Well, you also needed to do some compliance. Where you have a database, well, you had a commission system. So you started to pull some compliance reports out of that database. Probably needed to deal at some point, not just with the brokerage business, but also with the direct fund business. So you started manually or electronically loading that data. That kind of worked. That kind of stabilized things for a while. Then over the subsequent years, there was just an absolute explosion of data sources represented really across the bottom, product types, and therefore different places you have to get data, and functional requirements across the top. And if you look at that diagram really represents utopia. That is, every data source seamlessly talking to every functional need. And in the real world, that's not what anything looks like. So that has rapidly become truly an unmanageable situation for even the largest of firms. Again, talking a little bit about the increasing requirements, I remember back in the mid-90s, we did an Advent implementation for PaineWebber. The size of your relationship with PaineWebber didn't matter. You had to have $1 million in equity in that account to get a performance report. Today, you expect a rate of return on a $5,000 mutual fund position, right? So customer expectations are growing dramatically. Clearly, the regulatory requirements are growing dramatically. And if you look at, from a firm management standpoint, margins aren't what they used to be. You can't just do some more prop trading and make it up on volume. So you got to look a little closer at the operation. Where are you making money? Where are you losing money? So there's an absolute rapid explosion of functional requirements. And if you take the old approach of go buy a books and records solution to do books and records, go buy a post-trade supervision solution to do post-trade supervision, go buy an advisor-facing data aggregation tool, continuing to take that old approach of a point solution for each and every need really results in a completely unmanageable situation. So the solution starts with the data and a solid foundation of data across, and sorry, still figuring out how to work the button. So ensuring that you're gathering a full scope of data on all products and you're normalizing it, looking at things like product types, validating rep and branch codes, and making sure you've got a solid foundation of data that you can then use to feed downstream systems is really the only way you're going to get the data monster under control. This is, of course, the perfect diagram that's easy to draw that truly does represent the utopian state of a data warehouse fed with all of your products and all of your information supporting the functionality around it. And again, want to stress the point, all your products, all your data sources, and not just maybe strong commission information and rep information because you've extended a commission system, right? That's what a lot of firms did, is they started with a commission system and then they simply extended it. And 10 years later, that system is still very strong on commission and rep information, but not so good on account and customer information. So really isn't able to support your compliance needs. So you really need to look at implementing a data warehouse, a data store, a platform that has the full scope of data from all your products and custodians, and then the full breadth of data. Revenue information, account information, registration information, rep information, customer information, transactional information, and so on and so forth. Again, why now? Why? Because it's interesting, we've been talking about this data story for really about 10 years, and it truly is reaching a fever pitch. All the functional requirements we talked about, the regulators, the need for analytics, both from a risk standpoint, from a profitability standpoint, and specifically something that's evolved is the need for client-centric account management. we've talked about householding for a number of years, and we talk about it in terms of saving postage, and we talk about it in terms of providing a consolidated statement for your advisor. But it's become even bigger than that. You really have to consider all three tiers of a relationship, starting at the top, right? The net worth doesn't change, but the suitability might. The net worth and suitability doesn't change, but the investment objectives might change. So if you're still doing something as simple as post-trade supervision at a custodial account level, what do you do when you've got different information under different customer information, different custodial accounts? That used to be okay. That used to be just kind of a mistake that was kind of in the margin somewhere. But it's becoming a huge issue. You have got to give your advisors the ability to look at the entire relationship. You've got to give your supervision people the ability to truly understand the nature of the relationship with the client and the services the advisor is performing for that client. And you can't do it unless you understand at kind of a hierarchical level, who's the client, what sort of accounts do I have, what sort of accounts do I have for him? And then obviously at a custodial level, you need that to be able to balance commissions and settlements and so on and so forth. So taking a three-tier approach to a data warehouse and understanding all of the data through your firm has just become almost mandatory. And there's not a lot of folks out there that are thinking about it that way or approaching it that way. Another example, just to really drive home the point, not only do you need to meet the regulators' needs, not only do you need to provide information for your advisors, not only are your end customers and investors expecting more and more information from their advisor, the real need for analytics is growing as well. Practice management is a real big buzzword. Another good example, or really associated with that, right? Conventional wisdom says if my biggest revenue advisors are my best ones, or my biggest revenue customers are my best ones. Well, you start looking at the size of the transactions, the cost associated with that revenue, the risk associated with that revenue. That conventional wisdom of your biggest producer is your best advisor, that might not be true anymore. So the real ability to cut up, weighing for risk, looking at expense of supporting different types of business, really being able to analyze what does a profitable advisor look like for your firm, and help your advisors analyze what does a profitable customer look like for me, is just it's huge. It's high value things that are only able to be accomplished if you have a solid foundation of data to work with. Having that solid foundation of data, feeding all of your, or as many as possible of your downstream systems with that data that's been aggregated, again, normalized for things like product codes, validated for reps, things like that, gives you the ability to manage these things. Random item off of that list, there are point-in-time reporting. Some of the data warehouses that are out there today allow you to go back and look at a customer account exactly as it existed on a given day. What was the address? What was the investment information? What was the customer profile? What were the balances and positions at exactly that day in history? There's a lot of firms out there that still can't do that. And again, that's becoming, that used to be acceptable. Today, providing the support your advisors and customers are looking for, meeting the regulatory needs, it's just not acceptable to not be able to look at that type of information anymore. Again, there's the picture. That's the target. Closest you can get to that as possible. So now I said that I'd talk a little bit about what a firm can do in 2014 as a matter of what's out there and realistic expectations. How can you address these needs? And it's the old build versus buy discussion, and I wanted to talk through that a little bit. For a certain profile firm with a certain appetite for budget and a certain level of sophistication, building it is an option. We've seen firms successfully do that either by taking, taking some third-party some third-party applications in-house and building on top of them. In some cases, taking existing systems and building from scratch. It is a highly specialized product. It certainly can run long. I don't think we've seen a client do an internal build that's been anything less than 2.5 times the timeline and budget originally forecasted. 4 to 6 times is a little bit more standard. And then once it's done, do not underestimate the need to maintain it and the need to maintain the data with it, right? Requirements change, you need different data, you need to change the relationships in the database. Do that going forward, but what do you do about the existing data? So do not underestimate the scope or magnitude of doing it yourself, but because if you have a business, an IT department that is truly understands your needs and understands the data, sometimes that can be a good way to go. I don't normally editorialize this strongly, but I do have pretty strong feelings on buying from a generalist vendor. Go out and spend your first $1 million to do a full Oracle implementation and build the data models. Your next $1 million on business objects to work on the reporting. Your next $1 million realizing what it is you missed in the data. Now that you're pulling reports, you realize what was missed in the setup of the data models. I have not seen a successful implementation of a heavy iron, if you will, Oracle type solution from scratch for more than maybe 1 or 2 sophisticated firms with an 8-figure appetite. Likewise, if your parent is a bank or insurance company, the number of times I've seen clients say, well, our parent company has this big enterprise-wide Oracle financials implementation, and we're going to leverage that. The numbers that I have seen to go from that might be working for the insurance company to actually be practical and usable for the wealth management side of the house, the numbers are astronomical. The timelines have run far worse with far less success than the wealth management firms, or in this case, or in this reference, wealth management groups within the firm that have said, you know what, I'm just gonna kind of build it myself. So again, whether it's approaching it big picture with one of the major database vendors or whether it's leveraging a parent company's implementation, just kind of being sincere, haven't seen one work yet. The other option is to buy from a specialized vendor. Guys like me, a lot of folks that are here. There are vendors out there that have data warehouses, that understand the business, that understand your business, that have data models built that support your business, that are thinking ahead about things like the 3-tier model that needs to be addressed, and that have the consulting knowledge and expertise to actually implement it in your environment, understand the systems they probably need to talk to. Clearly I'm biased when I say 70% of the time this is probably the best route. But again, same issue. There's an awful lot of vendors out there that might have a data warehouse because they started providing a compliance solution or a data aggregation solution for the advisors, but the scope and breadth and depth of that data warehouse isn't there. So again, I think an industry-specific vendor is absolutely a viable solution, but just like considering an internal build, got to look at it very, very carefully. This concept around data is, I think, very core and very important. But I wanted to take just a second to take a step back. The real point here is you have to look at your business holistically. How do we acquire advisors? How do they acquire customers? How do they process business? How does that business flow into my firm? How do I properly supervise and keep records on it? How do I support my advisors in maintaining their relationship with those clients on an ongoing basis? How do I have the back-end information I need to meet all of the regulatory requirements, to do the types of profitability and practice management, reporting and analytics that I need to? And then I have all that information, so where does that mean I go from there? Where does that mean an advisor goes next with his customers? Where does that mean you focus your recruiting efforts on new customers? Truly, it has become a a very big, very complex system, and you absolutely have to look at it holistically. Whether you're talking about data, whether you're talking about new business processing, or another great example, kind of a microcosm, but is compliance, right? 10 years ago when we talked about compliance, we essentially were talking about post-trade supervision and some maybe licensing and registration and that kind of stuff. That's not what we're talking about anymore. That's almost a gotta have it, but not an afterthought, but that's just a gotta have it. Compliance today is much more about monitoring all of your advisors' interactions with their customers and how they bring in business and a solid workflow to that business and proper creation of paperwork, proper creation of a customer account record, right? Firms say, oh, my books and records for direct business are the images of the forms that are stored in my data warehouse, in my imaging system. That doesn't work anymore. There's no data behind it. There's nothing you can do with that. You can't help your advisors understand what assets their customers have. You can't answer the regulators' questions. You've got to have actual electronic data records of those things. So again, the example there is compliance has gone from something that can be solved for in a single point solution, some licensing and registration stuff and some post-trade supervision, to really being something that has to be managed end to end through the entire firm. So that is, I think, again, I was asked to focus on data, but I can't stress enough how much that applies to the entire firm and the way you conduct business, the way business moves through your firm. Talked about the compliance example, give you guys one other example, and this is I'm told I can spend about 2 minutes on a little bit of a commercial, but this is, to me, what you need to be thinking about whether you look to us or someone else, specifically with regard to bringing on new business. A lot of firms have different processes, different workflows, different paperwork, different supervisory procedures, depending on the type of business you're bringing on. Some of those things might need to be there, but for the most part, the more you can unify those workflows, have a single way to bring on new business, regardless of product and custodian, regardless of registration type, a unified workflow, easier for the advisors, more efficient for the middle office to process, I think is a very, very important way to be thinking about it. And to talk through this diagram for just a second, an advisor can start with a CRM record. They can start with an existing account. They can start with a new client with nothing, but an intelligent way to gather all the information on that client and the account, make sure they have the right versions of paperwork, make sure that paperwork is accurately completed, make sure all the supplementary forms and disclosures and the whole paperwork package is properly assembled. All of the imaging associated with that, all of the workflow associated with that, for the appropriate approvals, signature, supporting wet signature or e-signature, random items, address validation, make sure the address is right, and then ultimately producing a package that is accurate and complete and goes with it, not just the paperwork package, but an electronic account record. That is truly an industry-changing or a business-changing methodology to look holistically at how you're bringing business into the firm, how you're processing it, how you're supporting it, and how you're maintaining it. So they asked me to hustle a little bit because I know we're a little bit behind. That is pretty much what I had. I actually have 5 minutes left. Any questions, any comments? I'm curious, who has active data management projects underway? Handful of firms. And how about active account management or unified account opening types of projects underway? Same couple folks. That's interesting. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, I'll leave you with time for the break before the next session. Thank you.